Welcome to the SIG 100 SOPIS tutorial. This video will provide a brief overview of the SIG 100 and its SOPIS ET user interface. The SIG 100 is a simple sensor integration gateway that consolidates wiring by collecting multiple input and output signals and converting them into an IO-Link message. It also allows the user to create a simple standalone sensor system through a powerful built-in drag-and-drop logic editor. Signals are processed on the 6 M12 ports to which sensors and actuators can be connected. There is one M12 port for power. The additional M8 port on the right is for USB configuration via the SOPIS engineering tool from SICK. Each of the M12 ports has two available pins that can be configured as a discrete input or output. This means that it is possible to process up to 12 signals on the 6 M12 ports using a suitable splitter. Note that each port is limited to 50 milliamps. Make sure to observe the power consumption of the connected devices when starting a new project. As mentioned previously, the SIG 100 contains a powerful drag-and-drop logic editor that can be used to create a system with the attached devices. In this way, multiple sensors can be used together to solve more complex applications. The SOPIS engineering tool allows for easy configuration of the SIG 100 and access to the logic editor. Simply provide power to the M12 power port and connect via USB using the accessory M8 adapter cable. Then open SOPIS ET and access the user interface. Note that SOPIS version 2018.2 or later is required. The rest of this tutorial will walk you through the SIG 100 user interface so you can get familiar with it before starting to solve applications. The user interface has three small navigation tabs located in the top left corner of the screen: the menu button, the home button, and the currently selected configuration page. The menu button simply toggles the configuration page tree. Note that the button is highlighted in light blue when the device tree is hidden. The home button will always navigate back to the status configuration page. The status page is the home page and shows the input or output state of the connected SIG 100 along with the port configurations. The configuration page allows configuration of each M12 port on the SIG 100. This includes the 6 main M12 ports and the power port. It also allows the user to toggle between digital and analog in the process data out for the IO-Link data frame. The identification page simply provides product details for the connected SIG 100 like software and firmware revision number. The logic editor allows the configured SIG 100 inputs to be merged into logic blocks and assigned to configured outputs. This allows the user to create an intelligent system with the connected devices. The settings page allows the user to change the language between German and English, and the display mode depending on the type of device being used with this interface. Note that there's an information button which provides more detail about the interface software release. Buttons located at the top right of the interface provide global device information or configuration. These buttons will be present regardless of the configuration page selected. The refresh button simply updates the selected device page with the connected SIG 100 configuration state. The pinout button provides the IO-Link process data structure when the SIG 100 is set up to operate as an IO-Link device. Note that the data structure will change depending if digital or analog is selected in the configuration page. Process data in is the data being transmitted out of the SIG 100 and to the connected IO-Link master. QL1 through QL8 are the logic editor output states. QINT1 through QINT12 are the states of each input or output on the 6 main M12 ports. Each bit has a bar next to it that will be gray if the signal is logic 0 and lights up orange if the signal is logic 1. Note that the M12 power port has two discrete outputs, but these are not transmitted in the IO-Link process data frame since they also occupy the M12 power port. Analog value 2 and analog value 1 are outputs from the SIG 100 and calculated via the logic editor configuration. For example, this may be a counter value. Process data out is the data being transmitted to the SIG100 from the IO-Link master. As mentioned, two different data formats can be selected from the configuration page and will be reflected in the Pinout button view. When the digital process data out mode is selected, the SIG100 process data out will receive up to 16 discrete values from the IO-Link master. These are labeled IL1 through IL16 and will appear for use in the logic editor. When analog process data is selected, the SIG100 process data out will receive one analog integer value from the IO-Link master. For example, this may be a value for which a counter should be compared in the logic editor. Refer to the operating instructions for additional detail on the SIG100 process data structure. The Find Me button will simply activate the Find Me mode of the SIG100. With Find Me active, the DO LED of the M12 power port will flash on and off. This makes it easier to physically locate the SIG100, which is currently connected for configuration. Note that while Find Me is active, no other interface navigation is possible until pressing the Stop button in the dialog box. The Restore Factory Settings button sets the connected SIG100 to factory default settings. It will only work if the SIG100 is set to proper username access. Otherwise, a notice will appear. Username access is changed by clicking the Run button on the lower left portion of the user interface. Change the username access level to Maintenance and enter the password MAIN in lowercase letters. Then click Login. Now the Restore Factory Settings button will start the process when clicked. A Confirm Action dialog box will appear to double check that you want to restore factory defaults. Any setting currently stored in the device is overwritten if OK is clicked. After clicking OK, a success box will appear indicating that the connected SIG100 has been restored to factory default settings. Click OK to go back to navigating the user interface. Note that changing the username access to Maintenance will also allow the user to change device settings found on the configuration and logic editor pages. The Help button will toggle a help screen on the right side of the interface for each configuration page. This provides more information about the SIG100 as it relates to each page. Note that the help screen will stay open as you toggle between different configuration pages on the configuration page tree. The Edit button allows settings on a given configuration page to be changed. It will be highlighted light blue when activated. Pages that can be configured will be gray until the Edit button is selected. Note that you must also be logged in as Maintenance for the Edit mode to operate. The Status page is the home page. It shows the port configuration and state of any inputs or outputs for the connected SIG100. The LEDs will illuminate if the input or output is actually active, also known as Logic State 1. The ports will reflect the input or output setting established on the configuration page. Also, the port labels will update to reflect the user-defined port label text from the configuration page. The configuration page will start by showing the configuration of the power port. Make sure you are logged in as Maintenance and click the Edit button to change the configuration. Select the drop-down box and choose the desired output setting. It's possible to configure the outputs on pin 2 and pin 4 of the power port as PNP, push-pull, or off. A PNP output will provide the SIG100 supply voltage to the load. The push-pull output will provide either supply voltage or common depending on the load requirements. The DIDO page allows the user to change pin 2 and pin 4 on each of the 6 M12 ports to either input or output. S1 through S6 refers to the ports, with S1 being the first or top port below the power connector and S6 being the port at the very bottom. DID01 will always refer to pin 4 and DID02 will always refer to pin 2. Port labels can be added and will be carried over to the configuration and logic editor pages. Note that the labels are limited to 8 characters. The IO-Link page simply allows the user to toggle between digital and analog for the process data frame. As mentioned previously, digital allows an IO-Link master to send up to 16 discrete states to the SIG100. Analog allows the IO-Link master to transmit an integer value to the SIG100. Differences between the two can be observed by clicking the Pinout button in the upper right corner of the interface. The logic editor is a unique feature for the SIG100 that allows the user to create a simple system with the connected sensors or actuators by dragging and dropping logic blocks and connection lines. The left side of the screen lists all configured inputs, which aside from the physical inputs on the M12 ports, also contain those that may be coming from an IO-Link master via IO-Link process data. The upper middle bar contains the available logic gates that can be dragged down into the workspace. And on the right side are the configured outputs, which include those that may be sent to an IO-Link master via the IO-Link process data. Note that the screen is gray until the user logs in as maintenance and clicks the Edit button. Use the configuration page to change inputs and outputs and add labels. These changes will then be reflected in the inputs and outputs available for connection in the logic editor. The same happens if the IO-Link process data is changed on the configuration page. Selecting the process data as analog or digital will change the available connections on the logic editor. The first step in creating a logic system is deciding which logic gates are required, clicking on them and dragging them into the workspace. Note that if a logic block is incorrectly selected or needs to be removed, simply click on it and drag it back up to the selection bar where a garbage bin will appear. Next, make connections from the desired inputs to the logic gates. First, click on the desired input, then click and hold on the arrow. A connection line will be created. You can then drag the line to the input of a logic gate. As you get closer, the logic gate inputs will expand to accept the connection line. The same process can be repeated for all desired connections. Note that once a connection is made, you can move the bin location, the logic gate location, and change the window size. The connection will automatically be scaled. If you created an incorrect connection, simply click on the connection line and drag it to the top bar where a garbage bin will appear. Once all connections are established, click the Transfer and Execute Flow button to transfer the logic to the SIG100. An error message will appear if there are any improper or missing connections. The notification area will indicate a successful transfer. Note that clicking on a notification will make it disappear. Next, test your application. In this case, we observe that when both sensor 2 and sensor 1 inputs are active, output 1 will be active, as defined by the logic configuration that was just created. Remember that editing your logic configuration is simple after testing. You can add new connection lines as needed. Likewise, a connection can be deleted by dragging it to the garbage bin. There are a few things to note when creating connections. Discrete inputs or outputs with a Boolean data type will have black connection points. Analog inputs or outputs with an actual integer value will have red connection points. Analog and discrete signals cannot be interconnected. Notice that if a connection is not possible, the user is simply unable to complete the connection line. However, in inputs arrows and text will be green if a connection point is possible and the connection can be completed. Last, some outputs, inputs, and logic gates have a small configuration gear in the upper right corner of its block. This indicates that additional settings are possible. Clicking on the gear will open the Additional Settings dialog box where application-specific settings are possible. An information icon provides more detail on a given setting so the user can properly adjust for the application. This concludes the overview of the SIG 100 and its SOPIS ET user interface. You should now have a basic understanding of how to configure and use the device. Please refer to the operating instructions for more detailed product specifications and information on the Logic Editor's logic block operation. Now go, create some sensor systems, and solve applications.